Thank you and good morning all. Welcome to this plenary session for the Asia Infrastructure Forum 2019, Connecting with Neighbours, How to Create Partnerships Through Infrastructure. My name is Steve Howard. I'm the Secretary-General of the Global Foundation, which crosses borders, connects with neighbours and helps to create all sorts of partnerships for which infrastructure is one of the most important. I'm also pleased to tell you that I'm a member of the International Advisory Panel of the AIIB, and I am so thrilled to be here in Luxembourg, where the hospitality has been magnificent. Please come in and take your seats quickly. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. What a wonderful evening we had last night. The hospitality, but the music, both the expression in this beautiful auditorium and also the intent. The Eurasian continent so well expressed by those two beautiful, the duet on the marimba and what was the name of the other instrument that they were playing? The marimba and the, come on, who could tell me? Marimba and, there's too many people in finance and not enough involved in music in this room. I was just saying to President Jin before we started this morning, I think that was, of course, the military band, wind band of Luxembourg. And adding to his comments last night about peace, I think it would be suitable if every army in the world was given musical instruments instead of weapons, and they were all asked to play music. Wouldn't that be a good thing? And in fact, this is the kind of tone that has been set for this annual meeting in Luxembourg of the AIIB. It is about peace and development and cross-border connectivity. And a little later, we'll have a distinguished panel discuss these issues, a very brilliant panel coming from across the world, from ministerial posts, from high office, from intellectual and other backgrounds. But for the moment, to open our session, our plenary session, to set the scene for this high-level dialogue, promoting regional cooperation, cross-border connectivity, and introducing the AIIB's forward investment strategy, would you please welcome the President of the AIIB, Dr. Jin Lichun. Dr. Jin.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for your contribution to our bank. I remember before the bank was just an idea, we talked to each other, and you supported it. Good morning, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, back in this auditorium, and then you talk about James Bond. You see, I think lots of people love to watch James Bond. When I watch James Bond, I asked myself the question, can all these countries stop spying on each other and work for peace? And what if James Bond is unemployed? He would help facilitating the communication with all of us, right? So don't worry about that. But I think it's really a wonderful idea to turn the weapons into the instruments for development. The AIIB was created to drive economic and social development through investment in infrastructure. We are embracing the task to raise the quality of life and living standards of millions of people across the world by enhancing connectivity with and within Asia. Cooperation and connectivity, the theme of this annual meeting. Our first annual meeting held in Europe and outside Asia. Cooperation on infrastructure investments to connect the people and countries has brought great economic progress and opportunity to the people of Asia and Europe. But we are also connected by the common challenge, such as climate change, cross-border environmental issues, rapid urbanization, and social issues, among others. In the face of such challenges, we need smarter infrastructure solutions. The complexity of our global political and economic situation should not inhibit us from investing in priority projects where our members need them most. Slower investment in crucial sectors will compromise long-term development. And a well-coordinated investment program in infrastructure and other productive sectors will boost growth. While AIIB owes so much, vows so much to ramp up our efforts for a sustainable and connected Asia, we understand we cannot do it alone. It requires close partnership. In my words, partnership for all. This is why our bank has established the Asian Infrastructure Forum, a platform designed to stimulate discussion and catalyze real business development opportunities for all participants drawn from project sponsors, developers, financiers, government agencies, and many more. At last year's Asian Infrastructure Forum, the inaugural forum, we engaged with the business community and financial institutions in Mumbai, a dynamic financial hub of South Asia. This year, we are looking forward to building on this successful first AIF and to engage with all of you in one of Europe's leading financial centers here in Luxembourg. Today, we will engage on the topics of financing for energy projects and use of private equity for financial development. We will also hear from the governments of Bangladesh, the Philippines, and Uzbekistan on their investment environments. There will also be a workshop on how to do business with AIIB. We have created many opportunities for you to get to know each other better through a networking lunch, an interactive APP, and workshops led by world-class experts. Our vision for the Asian Infrastructure Forum is for it to become the prominent platform for business development and idea generation for infrastructure in Asia. Thank you for participating, and I hope you will all enjoy the forum today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jin. And just as he leaves us from the stage, he made a personal remark in my favour, which was very kind. But I just want to celebrate the genius that Jin Le-chun has brought and continues to bring to the AIIB. Please congratulate President Jin as he leaves the auditorium. Thank you. Our next speaker is one of the 5 Vice Presidents of the AIIB, Dr. DJ Pandian. He is Vice President and Chief Investment Officer, to tell us about the AIIB's investment strategy for enhanced cooperation and connectivity. Could you please welcome to the stage Dr. DJ Pandian? Thank you. And could we have the technical booth, could we have some fold back on the stage? Thank you very much. Dr. Pandian.
Good morning, friends, distinguished members of the panelists, and the participants. It gives me great pleasure to come and talk about AIIB. This is the second Asia Investment Forum which we are launching. Last year we launched in India, in Mumbai, one of the financial capital. I think it attracted a lot of attention and communication. Now we wanted to continue that dialogue. And today the topic is connectivity and cooperation. In fact, connectivity and cooperation is not new to AIIB. If you could go through the Articles of Association of AIIB, which is the founding document for AIIB, it will be very, very clear. The very first article, Article 1.1, very clearly talks about AIIB will foster sustainable development. It will improve infrastructure connectivity. How? By promoting regional cooperation and partnership with close collaboration with other multilateral and bilateral development institutions. So collaboration, cooperation, connectivity, infrastructure development is part and parcel of our job, our DNA. It comes automatically. If you don't do that, if you don't collaborate with other multilateral development institutions, if you don't invest in infrastructure connectivity, that means we are failing and all those things. So how to make AIB effective, how to make AIB productive, how to make AIB to reach out to the people of Asia, which almost amount for 2/3 of the population of the whole world, how to connect them with the rest of the world so that the prosperity can be shared. So that is the biggest challenge. We were just 3 years, 6 months old, 42 months. But within 42 months, we were able to deliver 45 projects, amounting to 8.5 billion. 1/3 of it is going to the transport, which exclusively deal with connectivity. And the 1/3 of it is going to energy sector. Partly that also deals with connectivity. Our first project in connectivity in energy is the TANF project. It is connecting the energy resources from Asia to Europe. It starts with Azerbaijan, it travels through Georgia, Turkey, goes to Greece, and all the way up to Italy to deliver the gas produced in Asia. So our first project, in collaboration with World Bank, we are a co-financier with World Bank. We put 600 million, World Bank put 600 million. This is a great example for connectivity and collaborations. We also, connectivity doesn't mean only country to country or continent to continent. Connectivity is needed sometime within the district, within the province, and from one country to another country also. Within the district, within the province, we have financed number of rural roads program. In India, MP rural roads, Gujarat rural roads, Madhya Pradesh rural roads, Andhra Pradesh rural roads. India is a fairly developed country in one of the, in the Asian continent. Still, the rural connectivity is a question. Similarly, Bangladesh, we connected people with the electricity. First time, 2.5 million people have been given the electricity connectivity. Because of that, the children were able to go to the school, study very well, goods can be stored in the refrigerator, primary health center can function effectively, ladies can reach the hospital. So it's an overall development need through electricity connection. So connectivity is our lifeline. Without that, AIB will not function. But today's world, the modern day world, is very dynamic. It is growing. That's not a problem. Population is growing. Trade is growing. Trade development is growing. Along with the population, the people's aspiration is growing. But how are we going to meet this aspiration? That's the question. If we do not connect people, we will not be able to meet their aspirations. We will not be able to fulfill the real development benefits to reach across various countries, various regions, and various ethnic people. So we need to connect people. Today, we all talk about digital world. Digital world, yes, very good. It connects people. The communication connectivity is excellent in the digital world. But at the same time, it makes people to realize what kind of development is going on the other corner of the world. So their aspiration is going up. So ultimately, to make the people and goods move, we need to put the physical infrastructure. We need roads, we need bridges, we need tunnels, and we need airports, we need seaports, we need rail, we need everything. Without this, we cannot connect people. Now, when we put this infrastructure, trade and development will definitely go up. And trade and development is growing at 2 to 3%. The global development is growing. Some countries are growing at 7%, some are 6%, some are 5%. The overall globe is growing. For this, is it enough? Do we have enough money? Do we make enough efforts to take care of this development of trade and development? That's a question for this forum to decide. Along with trade and development, the wealth grows up, but how it is distributed? If one side is growing, another side is not growing, that's not a sustainable development. Something will happen. People will get up. People will question. So how we are going to answer? That's the main question. That is why 2/3 of the population in Asia, 1/3 of the population is rest of the world, but our GDP is only 1/3. It is because infrastructure growth is very limited. Here is the model. Because the Chinese government has continuously invested 30 to 40 years in infrastructure and lifted 500 million people out of poverty line. Today, when I visit Beijing or Shanghai or any other city, the development is phenomenal. It's an eye-opening for many people who visit China for the first time. Whether that model can be followed, AIB was created for that purpose. by investing in infrastructure, how we can create prosperity for our common people. That's the question. But the challenges are very high in providing this infrastructure. It is not enough if you have the intention. But what are the challenges? Physical challenges. There may be mountain. The geology of the country may be different. There may be rivers. There may be ocean to cross. If Nepal wants to connect with China, you have to cross the Himalaya. If some countries, Indonesia, if they want to connect with one island to another, the ocean is a problem. If you want to cross some other country, river will be a barrier. How we are going to overcome these barriers? These are all physical barriers. There may be mountain and other things. But again, the technology will play a good role. Today, there's a technology. How to penetrate through the mountain, how to put the bridge across the river, how to put high-speed railways so that people can move quickly. Technology is there. Physical barriers can overcome by technology. If you can connect to Hong Kong, Macau, and China, 56 miles across in the ocean, by putting a world-class bridge, it can be replicated and repeated in many other places. Connectivity can easily be done by overcoming physical infrastructure. But another problem will come, legal barriers. Apart from the physical barrier, legal barriers. You put up a bridge from one country to another country, you can cross. But they will say, my country, where is the visa? Where is the customs clearance? Where is the immigration? What is the problem or question of my sovereignty, territorial integrity? All these questions will be asked by some interested members. Genuine questions. How are you going to address? If every country follows a different custom rule or different standards, you put up a railway between Russia and China, going through via Mongolia. Every country has a different standard of gauge. The railway connectivity is different. Custom is different. Custom clearance is different. Immigration rules is different. So we need to overcome these legal barriers. First, we need to understand what is the law requirement in the particular country, what is the law and legal requirement in the country which is crossing through, and what is the law and legal requirement in the country it reaches. Unless we understand this legal problem, very difficult to overcome these barriers. Third is the financial barrier. We need huge money. Infrastructure requirement, we all know, it needs huge money, and its return is over a long period. It needs a special money for special purposes. How to mobilize these resources? It is here the collaboration and cooperation is needed. Not just one country, or not just by collecting one multilateral development bank cannot do that. We need collaboration. We need collaboration with all the multilateral development banks. Fortunately, AIIB has already entered into collaboration agreement with most of the multilateral development banks. We have collaboration agreement with World Bank, with ADB, with EBRD, with EIB, with Islamic Development Bank, with the African Development Bank, with the Inter-American Development Bank. So we are having a cooperation agreement. That is an individual bank to bank. But how all these people can be put together to mobilize money? Multilateral plus bilateral is also needed. Bilateral is not prohibited in the AIIB Articles of Agreement. Similarly, we need to mobilize private resources, institutional investors, capital markets. All these people, if they do not come together, we will not be able to mobilize enough money to overcome the financial requirement of putting up world-class infrastructure. That is why now the new step is coming up. Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance. This is again the initiative of AIIB. And I'm very happy to and glad to say that AIIB has been chosen to house this center, Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance. If it comes, then it is a forum where all the multilateral development banks can come together. Already they have signed an agreement, signed an MOU. World Bank, ADB, NDB, AIIB, all coming together. They signed an MOU to work for this forum. It is under preparations. I may not be able to share much, but when this forum takes place, that will help us to mobilize finance through various sources. That will help us to overcome the legal barriers. That will help us to produce quality reports so that the physical barriers can be addressed through appropriate technology. We will be able to develop proper project report. So this multilateral development forum is going to take place in AIIB. So we can overcome physical barrier, we can overcome legal barrier, We can overcome financial barriers also. But how to overcome the mental barrier? This is the final barrier. Even if we are able to overcome this barrier, something in the mind of the people, they do not want cooperation. They do not want collaboration. They do not want to build bridges. Some people would like to build bridges. Some people would like to build a wall. Are we going to build bridge, or are we going to build the barrier called wall? So this is up to the international community to decide how to overcome this barrier, mental barriers. Once we overcome this mental barrier, we will be able to overcome other barriers. There will be collaboration, there will be cooperation, there will be mobilization of resources, and we will be able to give better life to our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pandian. And now we turn to the substance of this distinguished panel, which I hope will be fast-moving, they will be concise, entertaining, but you have 5 very experienced panellists on the stage. So remember now, we're focusing on this high-level dialogue on how to promote regional cooperation and cross-border connectivity investments. And we know that cross-border connectivity is central to economic development. We know Europe's experience over 50 years is remarkable. 20 years ago, when I came to Europe from Australia, to learn that Europe was better in connecting in transport and connectivity across all those national borders than my own country, Australia. Quite a remarkable thing that Europe has achieved so much. Asia has done some good things, particularly in countries like China, but clearly has a long way to go. It's one whole continental mass, the Eurasian continent. They are deepening their connectivity. What more can be done? And promoting cross-border connectivity is the AIIB's core mandate. So I liked the challenges that Dr. Pandian laid before us. I liked, this is not simple, this is complex, it's long-term, it's strategic, but we have no choice. If we want economic growth and prosperity in a peaceful world, we need cross-border connectivity. And I think one of the things we'll get to is the role that the private sector can play, which is of great interest to me in my background, alongside the work of public sector. Now, our distinguished panel, I'm going to pose some questions to the panel. They'll respond briefly, and then we'll create an interaction going forward. Let me briefly introduce the panellists to you. Immediately on my left is His Excellency Mr. Shaukat Aziz, a former Prime Minister of Pakistan, and alongside me a member of the AIIB International Advisory Panel. Mr. Aziz also spent 30 years with Citibank. He's worked both sides of the street, and I'm going to introduce secondly, on his left, Dr. Mohammed Mait, the Minister of Finance from Egypt. A very distinguished background also in an academic capacity as well as in government. Again, this capacity to walk on different sides of the street in thinking about and making policy decisions. Next to him is Madame Zhou Jiayi, Vice Minister of Finance in China, a very distinguished career in the Ministry of Finance in China, which of course has been the pivotal driver in the early stages of the formation of the AIIB. And I'm very pleased to say I've had many years of working happily with the Ministry of Finance in China. Further left, Professor Giovanni Tria, who's the Ministry of Economy and Finance in Italy. And again, Professor Tria brings the same kind of rationality and discipline from his intellectual background at University Tor Vergata in Rome. So this is very encouraging to me, people who are occupying high office, public office, who also have a strong intellectual background. You're very welcome, sir. And last but not least, and I must say I'm pleased to have 2 women on our panel today, Ms. Marie-Gabrielle Ineiken-Fleisch, who's the State Secretary for Economic Affairs in Switzerland. And if any country knows anything about cross-border connectivity, and maybe we'll hear a little later on about 57 kilometres of that cross-border connectivity, it is Switzerland. So would you welcome the panel? Thank you. I'm going to resume my seat, but I'm going to pose the first question, and we'll run across from Mr. Aziz through the panel. Very briefly, the first question, connecting with neighbours. What are the enabling framework conditions for cross-border infrastructure investment in your view? Mr. Aziz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for the question. If I understood you correctly, you're talking about the enablers for connectivity across our region. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world today where connectivity is a key driver for growth. And to get connectivity, you can follow many paths. Today, it can be digital. It can be through sea, land, and air. And each facet of connectivity has different dynamics. The key is that for countries to reach their true potential, we must have an open mind to connectivity of every form. And what happens when you get connected? When you get connected, you open yourself to new markets. When you get connected, you can get better products in if you are importing. You can export your services, you can export your goods, you can export your thoughts to other countries. What does that result in? That results in economic growth. And today, the biggest challenge we face, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about many challenges today, is poverty or lack of people not getting enough income to survive. To achieve that, we have to open our minds and look at connectivity and look at how we improve it. Connectivity is all about creating opportunity. If you need to survive, you have to have economic growth. If the pie gets bigger, every sector of society gains. And of course, every government will focus that the low-income people benefit more. And what AIIB is doing in its initial years already, and I think this is tremendous, other development banks can take some lessons from it, that they are talking about promoting connectivity. Now, one example, I come from a country, from Pakistan.
Just take that example briefly, because I want to move through the panel, and I'll come
One
back to
example
you.
is Pakistan. We have been the pilots for One Belt, One Road. I think this is the best thing which China has introduced, and President Xi's initiative. I have been personally involved in this, so I speak from personal experience. We are building roads, we have built new ports, we have built new electricity generation projects, all coming from One Belt, One Road. This is very similar, in fact, to what we used to do with the World Bank and AIIB and others, and we are continuing to do that. But the One Belt, One Road initiative has been the fastest implemented and transparently implemented initiative of creating connectivity. Along with connectivity, my last point, you will also have to be opening your markets, you will have to be opening your minds, and you will talk about collaboration and cooperation. Once you open your markets and your minds, people will come to you themselves to improve infrastructure, to improve opportunities for your people and your marketplace. So this has just begun and the intensity is rising. I'm very optimistic that this will result in reduction in poverty, improvement in growth, and prosperity and peace will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aziz. A strong opening. Open your mind and open your markets. It's a mentality and it's an attitude. We're going to come back to One Belt, One Road, or the Belt and Road Initiative a little later on, but I want to return to my opening question to Dr. Mait as well. Sir, what are the enabling framework conditions for cross-border infrastructure investment in your view?
Let me say that there are some points have to be taken into account. Number one, it will be priorities. Every country will have priorities. So we have to ensure that the connectivity will address the priorities, not only for the country, but for those countries who will be connected to such infrastructure investment. Number two is to ensure that the regulatory framework is some sort of harmony, so it can lay the ground to be able to ensure the success of such connectivity. Number three is that the goodwill of the region, of the countries, that they can cooperate to be connected together with some. I have to give example. Egypt, exactly 5 years ago, was in a deep problem of electricity shortage, which was resulting in that houses, factories have something like 12 to 18 hours per day electricity cutoff. Okay? So when we decided this problem has to be sorted out in a different way. In a different way, we worked together over the last 4 or 5 years on a different path, a different regulatory framework, a different way of managing the problem. The result is now Egypt has a surplus of electricity production. Egypt is in agreement to export electricity to some Asian and African countries. Egypt is like a hub now for electricity production, which we can see agreement with Cyprus, with Lebanon, with Jordan, with others. We are in talk with Saudi Arabia in order to transfer electricity with some African countries, Sudan, Libya, and others. So this is a successful, but when you look deeply how this happened, you will find that AIIB, for example, AIIB and World Bank, IFC, and other came to some sectors which Egypt wasn't deeply investing in: renewable energy, wind, solar. We built the biggest solar electricity station in the world in Binban in Aswan, and Mr. Jen visited the station. The World Bank president came and visits the station, because this is an example of how the connectivity produced something not only for Egypt but for the whole region, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe. We have other examples like the gas, the natural gas. Also, a country which 4 or 5 years ago was importing significant part of its needs for the natural gas started to export, started to transfer itself to be a hub for the region, for Africa, Europe, Mediterranean. So yes, we have to ensure that we have taken all the necessary steps which will make us a successful examples for connectivity.
So that's a really interesting example. Egypt has turned from being a negative in electricity and power to being a positive and a net exporter. And it came about because of a mentality, a conscious decision. So it's a great start. Madam Jo, would you tell us your view about this opening subject, please?
Thank you very much, Steve. Before I answer your question about the enabling conditions, let me make one comment about the connecting to neighbors. What are the neighbors today? Traditionally, neighbors is about the geographical distance, neighboring countries, people living next door to you. But today, in the modern world, I think neighbors is about the accessible distance. And first, you don't have a wall in your heart. You're open-minded, you're willing to be connected with others. You need each other with others, and you want to cooperate with others. Then everybody all over the world can be neighbors. Having said this, let me respond to your question about the enabling conditions. I think at least we may have to look into the 3 elements. The first one is about the common interest and the shared benefit. I would like to emphasize the shared benefit when we build up infrastructure connectivity, because infrastructure is something about the long-term investment. Sometimes it may engage the long-term ownership by, say, foreign investors. And some countries worried about this, but my view is that the long-term foreign ownership itself may not be a sin. The key point is you need to put in place a shared benefit mechanism. I have an example here. One Chinese company, a shipping company, COSCO, got the concession for the operations of a Greek port. And then there is a framework of a shared benefit. And so far, the operation of the port runs very well and generated a lot of taxation to the host countries. So this is a good example of the shared benefit. And the second element might be the sufficient consultation and address concerns of each other. Cooperation is not only about how to work together for common objectives, but also about how to address the differences between the partners. And the third element is the common but differentiated responsibility to ensure the high quality and high standards of development. That means that the responsibility must be shared by all the stakeholders, but in a different way, according to each other's role and positions and development stages. Thank you.
It's very good. I think you might have the quote of the morning so far, Madam Jo, with your remark, "You have no wall in your heart." I also liked your quote about foreign investment may not be a sin. This is music to my ears. Addressing that same opening question, Professor Tria from Italy, what are the enabling framework conditions, in your view, for cross-border infrastructure investment? Please. Just talk.
Okay. Yes, I think this, we have to consider the context in which we are considering this big issue, because of course the issue is not now, it's not new. It's part of the relationship between connectivity and growth, is part of the history of humanity. Cool. But which is the context now? I think we have to consider some specific points. First one, now we are going to a level population of about 80 billion people. At the same time, we are living in a period in which we already had, we are having a terrific change in geoeconomic scenario. In this situation, the problem of connectivity and infrastructure become a problem of how to survive in this context, because we need cooperation and connect people. This is a big issue now. Then at the same time, we have a huge gap between liquidity and funds around the world, between savings and investment in infrastructure, private and public investment that are decreasing everywhere. How to fill the gap in this in this situation? Finance, modern finance, now is failing to convey this liquidity, these savings to investment in infrastructure, in public investments. Even if now we are in a context of very low interest rates around the world, then why we don't invest also through additional debt? This is irrational. Then we have to close this gap. This is why we are here. I think why we have AIIB and other multilateral development banks. This is which is the challenges in this context for cross-border, to improve cross-border infrastructure. But of course we need technology, we need the finance, of course, together. But also we have to deal with different standards, different rules, different laws, different regulations, different transparency and public procurement laws, different labor markets, different cultures also. This is one of the problems of just to start more, to invest more in cross-border infrastructures. This is one of, I think, important problem. What this means? That the first step to increase connectivity through additional infrastructure investment is to create connectivity between people, between institutions, between regulations, between standards. This is the first step in creating connectivity that we have to do. And for this reason, I think that we are here and we have to support multilateral banks. Then, of course, we have other needs. Of course, we need good projects, quality projects, and this means that we have to invest in additional technical capacity for project preparation. This is one of the other important problem.
It's a very good start, and you're echoing the theme I've heard from the previous three panellists so far. I mean, I love your opening phrase about how will we survive, because we have no choice. And the factors that I'm hearing from everybody one way or the other so far are not technical and physical, they're actually human. You know, it's about how we get standards and harmonisation and cooperation. So it's very helpful, but it raises big questions about, which I'll come back to, why is there such a gap between liquidity that's in the system in the world and investment in infrastructure? It's a puzzle, and we'll come back to that. But let's firstly hear from our fifth speaker, not our last speaker, but our fifth speaker from Switzerland, Ms. Anaiken Fleisch, who's the State Secretary for Economic Affairs. What is your view about connecting with neighbours and the enabling framework for cross-border investment, Madame?
Thank you. Actually, you were hinting to the right thing. I would like to take an example, but I have a lot of sympathy with what Mrs. Zhou said, that actually, you know, the whole world is our neighbor today. But still, I would like to take this example of this famous Gotthard tunnel of 57 kilometers, because I mean, if you look at Switzerland geographically, we are in the heart of Europe, in a very fragmented infrastructure surrounding, but which works well, as you were mentioning when you started. We have also been traditionally a transit country. Although we have very high mountains, we have been building tunnels quite early, and we have actually started our economic development with the transit business. So this big project that was the new Gotthard tunnel was actually really at the heart of the Swissness. And just to a few elements of this. So it was inaugurated 3 years ago. It was the largest construction project in the Swiss history. So for us, it was huge. And it is 57 kilometers rail tunnel, so the longest in the world, and it cost about 12 billion euro. Now, the question here is, you know, framework conditions for cross-border infrastructure and what do you do with your neighbors? Of course, our neighbors were key. And I'm happy that I have the Italian minister next to me. Since the first tunnels we did, we always had a lot of cooperation with our neighbors. And this was essential. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do that. And here also, I think cooperation was key, exactly because we have this fragmented transport infrastructure in Europe. And I would say two things. It is cooperation in hard infrastructure, so, you know, in the rails and, you know, that everything works smoothly. But what was extremely important was also the soft infrastructure. That is, you know, the interoperability of everything, the fact that we had different standards, different regulations, the fact that in Switzerland, we speak both languages, you know, German and Italian, but still the human part of the whole cooperation was extremely important. And really, we were very happy that we could finish this on time. I will maybe say something about the funding, because I think this is an issue. But I think that was really a good example of how you can actually, with cooperation, do something that is, you know, goes way beyond our borders in terms of magnitude.
So I'm very interested to, I mean, again, you're consistent with the whole theme, but this spectacular example of the Gotthard Tunnel, I think we'll come back to, because it is so spectacular. And I'm very keen, therefore, to have you elaborate a little bit more about this for a number of reasons. Because we want to now look at success and barriers. We want to turn our attention to not just high-level approaches, but what actually works and what things don't work and need to. And I love the idea of examples that work. You know, I think while you're arguing the big story, you have to have, but look at this, we turned around our energy sector from what it was, we built the Gotthard Tunnel. Now, a couple of questions to tell us some more about that story. You started in 1992, I believe, and it opened in 2006. Have I got that right? 16, I'm sorry.
It took 17 years, so
Okay.
but we started very much earlier. In the 80s, we already started talking about that.
So I want you to tell us something about what was the process that you employed to build the success to get support, because this is not just a technical top-down decision, including with other governments. As I understand it, you had to work very deeply with the people of Switzerland to make this work. Tell us more.
I think thank you. I think that the one important element was the decision of Switzerland to shift goods freight from the road to the train, to the rail. And this was, we had popular referenda on that in the 90s, and there was a conviction in Switzerland that through the Alps, if you continue to have more and more heavyweight traffic going through the Alps, at some point we would have a problem. And we actually accepted an initiative, a popular initiative, which wanted to protect the Alps. So this has to be seen a little bit in this larger context of protection of the environment. The other thing, of course, and that is very typically Swiss, is that we had a lot of referenda which were somehow connected to this big project. And this is Swiss because we have a lot of referenda, but because it also ensured that you have the acceptance of people once you build it. I mean, 12 billion euro is a lot of money. And, you have somehow to make sure that it is acceptable. So it was several things playing together, and also, of course, the discussions with the EU, where we had to also to explain that in order to fund this, we wanted to fund this tunnel with not with regular budget, but with a fund which was pluriannual, and which was actually fed by several taxes or charges, and one was the heavy goods vehicle charge, which is a charge that has to be paid by all lorries, Swiss, foreign, everything, going through the whole country. You have to pay that. And the other tax was the Swiss mineral oil tax. So it's all taxes that actually charge everything you do on the roads. So there is this incentive to, if you have to pay too much on the road, or you look whether it's not better to shift to the rail. And the last was a part of the VAT revenue. That has nothing to do with shifting. But the first two, I think, were quite important, that people saw, okay, we have to pay this, or whoever has to pay this, but it goes into a good project. And I think all of this actually was very much helpful in order to really make this a project that was, as I say, we are very proud of it still after 3 years that we have inaugurated it, and I think it is good for whole of Europe. I mean, it connects the ports of Antwerp and of Rotterdam to the ports of Genoa, which is, of course, for the whole development of Europe, I think an important part.
Great. I'm going to come to the other side of the Alps in a moment with Professor Trier, whether it's about the Gotthard Tunnel or more broadly experience, success stories, barriers from an Italian perspective. What this highlights for me, though, and for the AIIB, which I've long believed, is we need to understand deeply why successful projects have been successful, and learn from that and cross-pollinate that, transfer it to others. Learn what worked, why, and what can be learned from it. So I'm going to come back to that with the other panellists, but Professor Trier, would you like to build upon what the previous speaker has said from your own perspective in Italy?
I think as she explained what's happened is a very good example, because the first thing I think is that if you want to implement this big infrastructure, we have to gain consensus among population. This is the first point. We of course need a quality project, but we have to have a consensus. This means that the works can go on without opposition. And also it's interesting that this infrastructure, like the big program of the Mediterranean corridor among Europe, from Spain to the eastern European countries bordering Asia, then have to be linked with the challenge of, for example, the problem of climate, because the project started because the target was to substitute transportation by rail and not by cars or vans, etc. Then we have to link with the big challenges, and we have to involve all the population in these targets. In this way, we can, of course, find what we call the technicalities in finance, in technology, etc. But the political issues are very important when we start these big projects.
Okay, and so this is lessons on this side from European experience, and as we have said, Europe has generally had a head start in so many ways and is often very impressive. But then we turn to the business that the Asian Infrastructure Bank is involved in, which is connecting with and in and across to Asia. And I think it presents similar but different challenges. Why don't we hear from the three speakers on my right about ingredients for success, you know, what enables successful projects to occur. You talked about some principles early, Madam Jo. You talked about common interest, shared benefit, sufficient consultation, and common but differentiated responsibilities. How is China, and how is the thinking from the Ministry of Finance in China applying this logic to cross-border infrastructure connectivity in a successful way?
Thank you very much. I think one example of the common but differentiated responsibility to achieve the quality and high standard infrastructure is our initiative of MCDF, which is already introduced by Vice President Mr. Pandin from AIIB. This mechanism is multilateral cooperation center of financing development. So the mandate of this mechanism is to provide a multilateral platform to work on the project preparation and knowledge sharing and capacity building from the very upstream of the infrastructure development. Because one of the binding constraints today for the infrastructure connectivity is lack of bankable or good projects for long-term development financing. So the high standards and high quality must start from the project preparation. A multilateral platform like the MCDF, the idea is that we would solicit the donors' participation from both multilateral and bilateral to put in place certain amount of money to finance the project preparation with the high standards, internationally accepted standards. That will maximize the opportunity of financing for the infrastructure. And the projects will be recommended by different multilateral participants like World Bank, AIIB, AIIB, EBRD, and other multilateral development institutions. And we would also welcome the bilateral participants to this mechanism. I think this is an example of how can we deliver those values. Thank you.
Can I ask you, if I may, a follow-on question, because we mentioned earlier One Belt, One Road, or I call it the Belt and Road Initiative, which I support very strongly. By the way, I was present in May 2017 when President Xi Jinping made a major speech, what I call a relaunch of Belt and Road, and he talked about projects but also working together, cooperation on standards, but also he talked about a dialogue between civilizations, which was a very important high-level concept. This idea in the AIIB and your view from China about how this applies with high standards and good preparation on Belt and Road. What's the connection between, if there is one, between AIIB, Belt and Road in your view?
Well, AIIB is a multilateral development institution. What's its mandate, which is agreed by all the shareholders? As President Jin Liqun put it, in the Articles of Agreement, the mandate of the AIIB is described as promote sustainable development through the infrastructure connectivity and also promote the regional integration. I think the mandate of the AIIB is very much consistent with the value of Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road Initiative is initiated by China, but it is also a global development initiative. It's a kind of global public good with participants from each of every countries in the world who share the value and share the vision of BRI. So I think the relationship between AIIB and BRI is that BRI is within the mandate of AIIB. AIIB is supposed to support development initiatives from each of the member countries and build up the connectivity between and among different development initiatives from different regions and different countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very clear exposition, and it's very helpful, actually. Dr. Mait, what are the needs for connectivity in and with Asia? You mentioned the AIIB is supporting a major solar project in Egypt. What else would you like to see, and is there potential for private sector engagement in taking these initiatives further?
Thank you very much. And let me say that Her Excellency Vice Minister of Finance of China mentioned something with regard to the ensuring that the needed consultation and the needed preparation for an infrastructure investment project to be accepted, we have to prepare. But there is another side. The other side is to ensure that who will be having such projects will know that such a project will be accepted within the framework of infrastructure investment connectivity. Because sometimes I have the project, which is an Egyptian project for the interest of Egypt, but how can I know that this project will be of interest to match the objectives of cross-border connectivity? Okay, I have a problem with electricity. Okay, how can I, know that the AIIB will be interested to finance such a project which eventually will be matching the objectives of cross-border connectivity? We need some sort of dialogue, so awareness that we know that there are some national projects which can serve with such idea. Let me say Egypt as another example with a problem of natural gas. But eventually, when we sorted out, we found that this can work and address the cross-border connectivity, because now we can share the export and import of natural gas and make Egypt a hub to serve countries not only in Africa, in Asia, in Europe. So this is another point. The other point is that, yes, for example, Egypt, which decided to change its business model in order to sort out its problems in electricity, natural gas, in renewable energy, in many sectors, transportation, which Egypt is moving now to regard itself as a hub to serve for Africa, for Asia, and cooperation with Europe, and has a lot of projects, and decided to change the background, the legal framework, in order to ensure that when we present such projects, we are ready to attract not only international financial institutions, but as you've said, private sector. We believe very strongly in private sector. We believe that we have to have the ground that private sector is encouraged. PIMBAN is a good example because it brought out to us not only international financial institutions like the World Bank, IFC, the AIIB, and others. It's also the private sector came and participated. It became one of the best project and best financing model. And I believe the World Bank decided to regard this project the best project they have invested in for 2018. So again, we need to change. And I believe that for countries who are looking for growth, which will benefit not only the country, Egypt is growing at 6%. And we believe the growth can benefit our neighbors. Because when we sorted out the problem of electricity, natural gas, roads, it helping the others, not only Egypt. Because some other countries have shortage in electricity. We can export to them. At peak time, they need some support. We give them some support. Now, we are the president of African Union. We just a few days ago, we played a significant role for the continent African free trade area, which we believe this is a very good opportunity, and we believe that international institutions have to come and to use Egypt because Africa needs a lot of investment for infrastructure. The solution for sustainable development in Africa will play with infrastructure investment. Without it, Africa have a lot of challenges to achieve that. So what I believe that, yes, private sector has to play a significant role, and we have to ensure that our regulations is there to encourage them. But what Professor Trai said about the gap between liquidity, which is available in many places, particularly in Europe, and the need for it in a country which wants to grow because they have the opportunities. It's a big challenge. Why? Because I tell you, in Africa, in Egypt, for example, you can achieve very easily a return of 8, 9, and 10% in dollar on your investment. But when there is no some sort of closing this gap between the available liquidity and the need for such a liquidity for investment, it's a huge challenge, and it will not help both sides. It will not help those who have the liquidity, and it will not help those who in need in liquidity to grow and investment. And I believe this is one of the issues we need to sit down together and see what can we do in order to address this issue.
Okay, I hear you. I hear the passion, and I happen to agree with you because I've been living in this space myself now for many years with my background on public-private partnerships. I designed the model that Australia adopted itself 30 years ago. And now many of the big pension funds, Australia has the third biggest savings pool of pension funds in the world, fully invested in infrastructure in European and American and Western markets, but barely a few dollars invested in emerging markets. So something has to be fixed in the public-private relationship to bring the pool of liquidity to bear where the needs are great. I'll come back to that subject because that will be my final question, but I want to firstly hear from a man who's been on both sides of the fence as Prime Minister and Finance Minister in Pakistan, but also with Citibank globally. Prime Minister Aziz, you have great experience of what has been and is being done, for example, the Pakistan-China economic corridor is in many ways a precursor of the work on Belt and Road, AIIB. Do you have views about models for success and what we can learn from in that regard?
Yes, thank you. I think there is nothing mysterious in this whole effort. It is like any other development effort, number one. The key to any good development project, number one, is feasibility. Is there a need for something? And as we were talking about earlier, if a country needs connectivity, a country needs to access markets, a country needs to do things more efficiently, then they have to focus on infrastructure. Once they focus on them and prioritize the projects, then you look for financing, etc. So I think the One Belt, One Road and the AIIB's activities have added a new way, first of all, a new source of financing, which is the Asian Infrastructure Bank. And on the other hand, it gives rise to thinking that maybe our traditional approach, which was driven by the Bretton Woods institutions, and they have no exclusive on wisdom, they are good institutions, but people can think outside the box too. So, and they have their constraints, they have their limitations. So when we got other suppliers, that could be private sector, that could be the capital markets in the world, we've raised money for infrastructure there too, bond issues, etc. And then came the AIIB, which is really the focus of your question at the moment. There I would say the basic discipline, and this is very important for within our country when this started, the basic discipline of viability of the project, returns on those investments, returns on those loans, that should never be compromised. Now, there may be some projects which for human needs you have to do. There may be a very isolated part of the country which still needs water, healthcare, etc. That will be provided. But when you're talking about mega infrastructure projects, you cannot violate the basic rule of returns. And the time limit could be longer in some parts of the world and shorter in others. So those disciplines we never violated. You have to follow the feasibility thing, and the returns instead of 5 years could be even 10, but the returns have to be there. So that's one thing. And in One Belt, One Road, it's still evolving, and the AIIB is also evolving. These disciplines have been strictly followed. It is not that you walk through and you say, we'll do this without any feasibility, etc. So the rate of return has been very closely looked at. I know that when you read the press, people are confused because this is something new. And it also reflects the emergence of China in the financial sector, at a global level. Now that is a reality, ladies and gentlemen, and that does cause some pain in certain parts of the world. But I have explained to those parts of the world that, look, our basic standards of evaluating a project are no different than if we were borrowing from those countries too, which are uneasy or unhappy with what we are doing. We never compromise on our standards. We have a parliament, we have exposure, we are subject to questioning by the political parties. So we can't just do something in a box and forget about it. So my humble request to the audience also is to say, to never, when you read about One Belt, One Road or AIIB, the basic professional standards of any financing are followed to the letter, number one. Number two, our fight is also against poverty. Poverty is a challenge which almost all developing countries face. The degrees may vary, but developing countries do face that. So how do you counter it? Create opportunity for your people is the best way. I give them jobs, give them education, give them skills, so that they can earn their own income. People do not like to live on charity. They like to, or on subsidies, maybe. They like to live, they have a sense of pride that they will earn their own living. Now, there will be sectors of society, the people who are aged, who are injured, who cannot work, that has limitations. But there too, with the digital age now, everybody's connected. You look at Pakistan today, the tele-density is the highest we've had ever since our history. The phone connections, the digital connections are all over the place. What did we do? Not rocket science. In 1 minute, I can tell you, we had one state operator. We said enough, the honeymoon is over. We will go private also. Compete. If you, the state enterprise, can compete with these private sector enterprises, be our guest. And the result is the state company is slightly better, but the private companies are all over the place, and connectivity has gone up exponentially. And that is giving potential income to people, hence reducing poverty. And if you follow that basic, simple, you don't need 500-page feasibility studies on every project. You have to be practical. You have to be realistic. And once you do that, you'll see the runs on the board. Thank you.
Well done. The final round of questions. We have 10 minutes left before I wrap the session, and I hope you're enjoying this exchange as much as I am. It's extremely valuable. I'm going to ask each member of the panel in turn, maximum 2 minutes in a sum-up comment to say, okay, we've heard what we've heard. What should the AIIB be doing, and how can we, in our individual collective capacities, help? I'll start with our Swiss representative, Ms. Anaiken Fleisch. Madame, would you like to give us your closing observations?
Thank you. I think it was extremely interesting to listen also to the, Asian members of this panel. Well, I think we were, I think, the third non-regional member of AIIB, and we very quickly understood that what was necessary is to try to close the gap in infrastructure, in the gap of infrastructure there is in Asia, and so we very quickly resolved to become a member. Now, what we think is absolutely necessary wherever you have is to have, good, open, predictable framework conditions in order for also the private sector to be able to come in, to step in, and actually to maybe try to close a little the gap that Minister Tria was talking about. We know at least that our companies, if they feel that it is open procurement procedures, stable regulations, that this is something they like to see, because all of these projects are long-term. So I guess this is an important part, and the other one is, of course, to have the quality of the projects and of the infrastructure. It is better to have something that takes longer to build or takes longer to do, rather than something quick. It is often difficult because, of course, people would like to see the result fast, but in the end, I think it pays out if you can ensure that you have a good quality. And I would say that the private sector would be more interested in participating there than in something which you don't know how long it will actually last. And as I said, we have following this annual meeting, and we think the AIIB is doing a good job, an excellent job, and we are happy to be part of it. And we will continue to do our best to make this, even more fruitful in the future.
Professor Tria.
Of course, the mandate is to fill the gap in infrastructure and connectivity between Europe and Asia, of course. But how to do that? Of course, you have to try to put together more than now the companies coming from different countries in creating new projects. How to support quality projects, how to design quality projects. Because, for example, if a bridge is a need, is not a project. If I need a project, I need a bridge, I have to design a project, feasible, bankable, etc. How to involve private companies in this? This is a big problem, I think, not just for AIIB, because in infrastructure often it's difficult to find return for private capital. Then we have to put together the public resources and private resources. AIIB, like other development banks, cannot be just commercial banks, but they have to create instruments, financial instruments, in order to involve the private finance, and also private companies, of course. But private companies, of course, they have to have some returns. Long-term returns is possible, but we have to distinguish between financial return and economic return. The states, the public sector have to look at the general economic return and try to transform that also in a financial sustainability, of course.
Yeah, well, I share your view. I hear you, and I share your view that more needs to be done to actually understand what the private sector can do and will do, which is both the investors and project developers who may have different needs, and it may need a trade-off in terms of returns. And I think it's early days for the AIIB, but I would hope it'll get its skates on in this area pretty soon, because capital is there to be deployed. Madam Jo.
Thank you, Steve. There are a couple of things I would like to see from AIIB. Number one is be back to the fundamentals, to finance more cross-border infrastructure and generate better regional impact. The second thing is to enhance the country focus, to build up the country team and be responsive to the client country's need. The third thing is to innovate financial instrument. The financial instrument of AIIB probably should go beyond the borrowing and lending. The AIIB, we would encourage the AIIB to look into the possibility of, say, project financing, equity investment, and PPP to bring about more private sector capital flow, and also put in place a better debt management framework. Last but not least is to sharpen the knowledge capacity. AIIB should not only the sources of financial capital, but also be the source of cutting-edge knowledge of the infrastructure connectivity. And I would like to say that I have to confess that I myself is a James Bond fan, and I would like to see AIIB to be a James Bond in development, to fulfill its mandate with sustaining effort. Thank you.
Don't you love that? Great, okay. 007 is sitting next to me. Dr. Mait, your closing observations, particularly about the AIIB focus. Thank you.
Number one is that I would say we have to determine the connection between our priorities and your priority. Because what we think is top priority for us might not be what you are much interested in with connectivity and cross-border cooperation. So we have to come closer to define this very clear, and I believe this will be very important. Number two, I would say we need to determine exactly the definition of infrastructure investment, because it goes for me to something which might not be directly or indirectly serve what His Excellency, ex-Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shaukat Aziz said, we need something to help reduce poverty. So if you, yes, water, sanitation, electricity, all of this can help. But there are some other infrastructure which need a different definition of what we always go to with the definition and explanation of infrastructure investment to be. Number three, I agree with many of what it has been said here, that we need also to see more involvement of the AIIB in increasing the skills and increasing the knowledge transfer and close the gap between what we think and what the AIIB think. We need to come closer in this definition to help our team to understand what will be acceptable and what will be in the vision and in the portfolio of the AIIB, so we can easily get accepted for financing. Thank you.
These are powerful and consistent messages. I think this is extremely valuable feedback coming from this panel. Very powerful. The almost final word before I sum up, but from His Excellency Mr. Aziz, what would you like to see as a priority and a focus?
What would I like to see?
As a priority and focus for AIIB?
I think for AIIB, stick to what they believe. First of all, be very clear on what they want, which has been discussed in this room for the last 2 days. I think we are all aware of that. And in their objectives, clearly, is a strong desire to improve the quality and standard of living of the people of the region. But how do you do that? By creating opportunity. How do you create opportunity? Improving infrastructure, providing opportunities of growth to people. And every country's case is different, so you can't really generalize that. But I think if we follow these basic rules, we will get there. Also, we must recognize that connectivity is something now which is being discussed in every room in meetings like this. So on the connectivity side, each country head must be asked, what are you doing to improve connectivity? How will that help economic growth? And how will that help you reduce poverty? Whether it's digital, whether it's water-borne, sea-borne, air links, road links, train links, whatever it is, each country is very different. And to generalize is dangerous. But the punchline I would like to give as I end is that you must always be looking for those opportunities which didn't exist yesterday, but exist today, which is what we all carry in our pockets. This is one opportunity. It has created thousands of jobs. It has enabled people to change their lives completely. It is a money transfer system. It is a healthcare tool. And I can go on and on for a long time on possible uses, which this thing didn't even exist 10, 15 years ago. So we've made some great, as the world, we've made progress. And we must continue to look for these ideas which will make our lives easier. And whether it's connectivity, whether it's poverty alleviation, whether it's improving standards of education, healthcare, etc., all that can be put into it. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a stickler for time and I don't want to stand between you and your lunch in 3 minutes from now. So I'm going to bring the panel to a close. I promised you that we would have an exceptional session this morning, and we have had that. In fact, I've been impressed not only by the quality of ideas, but the quality of frankness and the things that have been put forward this morning. 20-something years ago, having been involved in Australia's partnership for developing a national infrastructure model that was exported successfully to the world, I was asked to advise on a complex hydroelectric project that was trying to be developed by an Australian and French partnership in Laos. Laos is a very beautiful small country in Asia, was very poor, has lots of hills, has lots of rainfall and lots of water flowing. And it had lots of bad hydro being developed at the time. This proposal was to develop a really good quality hydro where all the power that was generated would be exported to Thailand. So it was the export income for Laos. Very complicated project. It succeeded. Nam Turn 2 is its name. It met all the best practice standards of the World Bank at the time. And there were many standards. But what was the biggest problem and challenge with that? Today it's the biggest export earner for Laos. It's an enormous success story. And hydro was unfashionable at the time. Hydro done well is very effective. Hydro done poorly is a problem. The biggest problem was the amount of time it took. It took 10 years from conception to execution. Now, that included consultation with the community. I remember flying in helicopters up to very remote villages. I think I was the first white person some of these people had seen. And that was in the very early days. You heard the case in Switzerland, how long it took to bring a community along to get support before a project of that scale could be undertaken. Now, some of that means that big, complicated infrastructure cross-border will take time. Some will take less. But what is our biggest enemy today? It is time. The planet is burning under the impacts of climate change. We have to have sustainable infrastructure and we have to do it quickly. So how to resolve that tension between the need for speed and the need for quality is a very important issue that the AIIB should address. The parallel with that, as you've heard from the panel, is to say, how do we make this gap get complete between the private sector with trillions of dollars that it wants to invest and no vehicle, no means to do it to meet the needs that are required? I think if there's one big challenge coming from this panel today to the AIIB, it's be in that game to help find, don't be the one who has to do it, but help find the ways to do it. And I think what we also heard was the lessons of success, the actual stories, not just here's a beautiful shiny project, but here's the method, the process we used, wherever it was. Why did Egypt manage to turn around its power sector in 5 years, from negative to positive? Something happened, which was conscious decision-making, people going along on the journey and deciding to do it. Why did the Gothard Tunnel get, etc.? Learn from these case studies and take the people who did it to other countries to actually learn together how it might work. It doesn't all have to go through headquarters. It doesn't need a huge staff. It needs the connectivity of people in order to lead to the connectivity of infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking our brilliant panel for their exchange today and wish you well for the balance of your time here in Luxembourg. Thank you very much. Thank you. The session is closed.